Welcome back to the Caniac Chronicles, everyone. It's season 1. I believe this is episode 33. We're back into it here. Um, it's Sunday. It's June 7th. It's the day after kind of that game 3 heartbreaker for Carolina. What can you do? An amazing comeback, kind of foiled by an own goal, two own goals for Carolina. That's a tough game to lose. A very, very unusual, uncharacteristic type of game for the playoffs. There, Carolina has two own goals throughout the game. One early on Sean Walker, and then obviously the overtime winner for Vegas on Jordan Martinook. There's also two goals that are reversed, one due to offsides and the other for goaltender interference. And for the most part, I thought those were pretty black and white calls. I mean, yeah, the offsides call was black and white, and the goaltender interference was pretty clear cut. It was a pretty quick review, but anyways, we've got 3 games to review, so let's get out of the funk of last night. Let's break down these 3 games. All 1-goal games, first of all. I think that's the number one thing to be optimistic about right here, is that Carolina is within, shooting distance on all 3 of these games. Couple of really good comebacks during regulation to force some overtimes to be excited about as well. But the mistakes across the board have to be cleaned up by Carolina. And not just that, but specifically the second period needs to be dealt with. The Canes have not been really anywhere to be seen in the second period of these 3 games so far. And that's where the majority of the breakdown is occurring. If they could just play the first and third period of these games, then they would actually be, probably ahead in this series. But got to play a full 60 minutes. So without further ado, let's just jump into game 1 and, where it all began. Carolina comes out in game 1 absolutely on fire. They had complete dominance over that first period. You get the first goal in the first 25 seconds of the game from Nikolai Ehlers on a nice little breakaway. And then you have another one later in the game, or later in the period as well, from Nikolai Ehlers again to go up 2-0. And that's huge. That's huge at home. That gets the crowd involved immediately. Carolina outshot Vegas in that period 12-5. And it was just a great... I mean, what better of a start to a Stanley Cup Finals could you ask for? Unfortunately, just within a minute after Ehlers' second goal, Shea Theodore ends up scoring, and we go to the intermission up 2-1. Not the worst thing, but not the best thing there. You really want to close that period out up 2-0 and kind of keeping your foot on the gas coming into the second period. The second period gets a little out of hand there for Carolina. The Knights score 2 goals in the first 5 minutes. Specifically, they get the game tying goal at 2 within the first 30 seconds of the second period there. So it's tough. Vegas tends to score in bunches, and evidently, and Carolina's got to do something about it. Their defense is breaking down quite often. And that is uncharacteristic of them, and you need to be able to get beyond that. But the goaltending situation, you're not getting much from Anderson when things are breaking down like that, although it is getting to the point where it's happening so often you can't really expect him to get everything. But again, it's just whatever it is in the air, there's something about the second period that Carolina is essentially allergic to. But nonetheless, they move on to get the tie back there in the second period. Jordan Staal has scored in all 3 of the finals games so far, which is pretty exciting for him. On top of that, he breaks his brother Eric Stahl's record for most days between Stanley Cup final goals by 4 days. Eric held the record at 6,198 days, and now Jordan holds it at 6,202 days. So that was a cool little fun fact there. It reminded me of some, Henrik and Daniel Sedin point, records and stuff like that. So if you're old enough to remember probably what I'm talking about, you probably do. The third period comes around, and again, another early goal by Vegas. Brett Howden is a menace out there. He's kind of been Vegas's Taylor Hall, I would say, scoring clutch goals, getting into nitty gritty areas, and making things happen. But Gostisbehere off of a face-off later in the period ends up tying it back up. And, you think we're going to be going to overtime, or maybe Carolina can do something to close it out in regulation. But unfortunately, the same guy, Gostisbehere, loses his man late in the third period. Tomas Hertl ends up going up 5-4. And that ends up being the final. Tough game to take there in Carolina. It's not... You do in the finals, it's one thing to have lost to Montreal in the Eastern Conference Finals there in game one, but Vegas is by no means a Montreal Canadiens, quite clearly, because we couldn't scrape out game three last night, unfortunately. So we move on. Actually, let's look at the stats a little bit. Oh, so one thing I meant to mention is, we saw the shots on goal for the first in Carolina's favor, 12-5. Almost the reverse happens in the second period there. It's 11-5 in favor of Vegas. 29-23 overall in favor of Carolina. The face-offs were pretty much 50-50. There was 32 that went in Vegas's favor, and there was 31 that went to Carolina. The power plays were even with no goals apiece. The hits were in Vegas's favor, no surprise there, 35-26. We have block shots in Vegas's favor as well, also no surprise there, 16-13. The giveaways go in Carolina's favor, 18 for Vegas, 16 for Carolina, and the takeaways also in Carolina's favor, 7-3. On to game two. It's a terrible start, to be quite honest, for Carolina. They go down. Brett Howden again. I mentioned him in the last game. He scores one in the first. He scores another in the second. Carolina looks dead in the water after two periods, in my opinion. The shots were even that game, 26-26. In the first period there, yeah, that's right. There was 2 shots on goal in the first period. And Brett Howden, yeah, he gets that breakaway goal there, and you need something from Freddie on that one. You need him to come up with a save there. It's the second shot of the game. It might have been the first shot for them in the game, but either way, going 50% on saves in the first period is not going to win you a championship. And I know it's a breakaway, but look what happened to Bussy last night. He dealt with a breakaway. He dealt with a penalty shot from one of the best players in the league, Mitch Marner. And he walks away with it, out of the net. I wanted to say in his glove, but he just deflected it off to the side. And yeah, the play's over on a penalty shot. But you need something from Freddie on that play. I know the defense isn't there. They kind of collapse. But that's what the goalie is there for, to bail you out, especially when you're a team like Carolina, whose defense is so good throughout the game that you don't have to face all that many shots. It is what it is. After that first 2 periods there, Carolina finds their game finally halfway through the third. Stankoven makes a fantastic play behind the net. He completely overthrows physically Anderson on Vegas, and he brings it back across the back of the net, tries for the wraparound chance, and it goes off the defender and past Carter Hart to lift the Canes back into this game. It's now a 2-1 game. And then just a couple minutes later, Jankowski, first of all, William Carrier had an amazing play at the blue line to stay on sides, to stay standing up. He's getting leaned on by a Vegas defenseman coming into the zone. He keeps his leg up, beyond the blue line to stay on sides, and he also manages to continue playing the puck before going down, and he dishes it to Jankowski, who just wires it over Hart's shoulder there. It does clip off of his shoulder a little bit, but it goes bar down after that, and the stadium absolutely blows the roof off at that point. The Canes finally wake up there in that third period, and then later on the power play, you need the power play to get going. In that period, the power play got going, and Stahl makes a great tip off of Gostisbehere's shot, who I think was actually aiming for Aho, but Aho missed it, and Stahl managed to get a piece for that going in, and then Carolina's up 3-2. And then they take a bad penalty. Jackson Blake late in the third. I don't know what he was thinking, but and it was a kind of a weak embellishment, floppy type reaction. But, you can't expect that call to be made much at all in this league. I don't know. That embellishment penalty was literally created for Jeff Skinner. And Jeff Skinner doesn't play hockey much anymore, so they hardly ever call that penalty anymore. It's very rare. I think we saw it once so far this postseason, despite seeing a good amount of teams, and I think Carolina has had some of their own episodes of it, but you need to do what you need to do to get a call in your favor. And anyways, the penalty ends, but just shortly after Blake gets out of the box, it's chaos has ensued. The pointman takes a shot, from the blue line, and Anderson kind of, jabs his blocker at it. And unfortunately there, it just gets drilled into Mark Stone, who's standing right in front of the net, falls to the ground, and he, pots it past him. So we're going to overtime. Canes get a break there. It's a black and white tripping call for Tomas Hertl, funny enough. And, the Canes do not fail to capitalize on that power play, and it's just electric in Lenovo Center. A real feel-good game there, but, I think, and I'm pretty sure Rod mentioned it in some of the post-game interviews, there's still a lot to be had after that game. You get the win, it's good to have that win. This isn't the standings. This isn't the regular season standings where the points matter. This is the playoffs where the scoreboard matters each and every time. So you walk away happy there, but there is a lot to be had. Oh, and in between games 1 and 2, another non-ice practice, just like after the Eastern Conference Finals game 1. So, Rod's got a really good method there that when they have these terrible, horrible games, they do these practices without the ice, and it'll be interesting to hear, later on down the road, what went into those practices. I'm sure a lot of video review and, PowerPoint decks probably, but who knows? Maybe they were also practicing things just in slow motion, in a gym or something. Who knows? And then, looking at that game, just looking through the statistics really quick, I mentioned the shots on goal were tied. The face-offs really went into Carolina's favor that time, 35 in favor of Carolina, 27 to Vegas. The power play is 50% for Carolina. The penalty kill is perfect for Carolina. An even amount of penalties called for both teams. The hits were way in Carolina's favor that game, 46 to 25. I think after this game 3 loss last night, if anything, we'll look into the hit. Let me just preview it quick. I got it up here. The hits last night, 66 to 42 in Vegas's favor. So, Carolina's got to get it looks like whoever wins the physical battle ends up winning the game. So I expect to see a lot more hits from Carolina next game, even though they did have a pretty good amount of hits last night. But 25 block shots for Vegas, only 11 for Carolina. The giveaways go in Vegas's favor for 17 for Carolina, 12 for Vegas, and the takeaways are even at 4. And the series is now split going to Vegas, which is where they were playing last night. First of all, Mitch Marner, let's address it right out of the gate. After regulation, Mitch has 100% point participation with a hat trick under his belt. The ghost allegations up in Toronto are all the people claiming the allegations are pretty quiet, if I do say so myself. But Carolina comes out good again. They had a great first period last night. My wife and I were at the watch party last night. It was a lot of fun. It felt like being there for a real game, to be honest, but it was a little unusual, when the players don't actually walk out and you're just watching the broadcast on television. But anyways, finally Vegas has shots in their favor, 35-33 at the end of the game. The face-offs are still going in Carolina's favor. This is a huge day for face-offs, almost 60% for Carolina. They're 54 out of 91 in the face-off dot, which leaves 37 going for Vegas. The 2 power plays are both 1 for 2. The hits, I said 66-42 in favor of Vegas. The block shots are in favor of Vegas, 30-14. The giveaways in Vegas's favor, again, 25 for Vegas, 30 for Carolina. And the takeaways in Vegas's favor, 11-3. By all accounts, the Carolina Hurricanes should not have even been playing after the 60 minutes. This I was fully prepared, not just to be embarrassed 4-0, 4 something, but I was fully prepared for the shutout to happen. But because Carolina's first 2 periods just looked pretty horrible. They had a decent first period showing, but nothing came of it. They had 7 shots to 2 after the first, but Vegas turned the throttle up in the second period there. They got the 2 goals that were waved off. They had the 4 goals ensue in pretty fast succession. 10:26, Tomas Hertl gets it going on the power play. 16 seconds later, Mitch Marner scores. That's that own goal, I believe, from Sean Walker. Tough play there, but it happens. My brother's thinking at that point, Rod needs to call, a timeout there. In my opinion, I think you pull Anderson at that point. It's about the halfway point of the game. It's getting out of hand. I'm pulling Anderson at that point, if that's me. And certainly after that, I forgot if it was Mitch's second or if it was his third, but he's on a breakaway and he takes a wide open slap shot from the playoff dot, and it goes in low blocker side. And it was a bad feeling after that second period. It felt terrible. It felt like we were watching preseason hockey. It felt like we were watching a team new to the game. It did not feel like the Stanley Cup Finals. It felt like a pickup game. It felt like it was one team playing and that was it. And you really were hoping. I wanted to go home, to be quite honest. I turned to my wife during the intermission and I said, well, do you want to go home? And, she's optimistic. She looks around and just kind of soaks in the atmosphere for a little bit and says, let's hang for a little bit and just see what happens. And in the back of my mind, I'm going, if nothing's happened by the 10-minute mark, we're out of here. And the Hurricanes must have heard that, because at 7:03, 7:29, and 7:42 in the third period, they score rapid succession. It's unprecedented. It was a complete unprecedented string of 3 goals there. That's the fastest a single team has scored 3 goals in a Stanley Cup Finals game in NHL history. Tons and tons of records being broken here in this series, and last night they were poised to break a very, very long-standing. Actually, I think they would have been the first team in a Stanley Cup Finals game to come back from a 4-0 deficit. I believe there was one team that did it in the playoffs, but it was not in the finals. And I think it was the Kings against Edmonton in uh, in 1982 or something. They put it up on the TV, and I should have wrote it down, but it was something like that. Kings over Oilers in 1982 or 1986, something like that. They overcame a 6-2 deficit, or a 4-goal deficit basically. And then Carolina gets a power play late in the game. They took a couple of dumb penalties themselves, like a delay a game and something. Somebody took a delay a game. Was it Hall, or might have been, forgot. Oh, Jarvis. I think Jarvis had the delay a game last night. He threw one over the net there. It was, yeah. Jarvis took a 2-minute delay a game. Puck over the glass at 12 minutes and 7 seconds in the third. They end up killing that penalty. That they had a lot of momentum in their favor already. Killing that penalty gave them a lot more, because later on at 17:05, Shea Theodore takes a 2-minute delay a game penalty for throwing the puck over the glass from the defensive end. So Carolina ends up pulling their goalie while on that power play, and in true Stanley Cup fashion, they end up tying the game there in late in the third period. 18-18, Svechnikov is credited with the game tying goal. It was complete chaos at the net. Jarvis got hucked into the net from one of the defenders on Vegas, and in that process of being thrown into the net, one of the Vegas players, I think, hits Hart's leg, which had the puck kind of covered, which kicks it in, and that gives Carolina the tying goal. Absolutely electric scene at Lenovo Center. It was like being on cloud nine as a Hurricanes fan, to see that comeback unfold, and you're feeling really good going into overtime. But if you're a true hockey fan, you are feeling a little uneasy, because overtime either team could score. Before I keep going, Brandon Bussey deserves a special shout out here. The guy was unbelievable coming in the third period cold, having not played in months, any professional, any NHL hockey, but specifically being his first playoff hockey appearance. He stood tall. One thing, what I was thinking about last night watching him, not just the fact that he, shut out Vegas in the third period, which is what you needed him to do. If you were going to have any shred of a chance to make a comeback in that game, you need your goalie to have a perfect game from that point on. And he pretty much did that. He really did, because even at the end there, it was Martinook's touch off of that weird ricochet from the boards that ended up going in, and that one isn't even close to being on Bussey. But it was just the difference there between Bussey and Anderson, in my opinion. Not just the fact that one of them catches with the left hand and the other catches with the right hand, but the clear difference to me is, Freddie is always talked about and regarded for his calmness in net. Freddie's this calm guy. He's the same as he is when he's down 3-0 as he is when he's standing on his head and the game is tied 0-0 or 1-0 and you're winning 1-0, something like that. But the difference between him and Bussey from that perspective, I think Bussey brings the calmness factor to it as well. I guess maybe not as trademarked as Anderson does, but there's a calmness there about Brandon Bussey. But more specifically, Brandon Bussey brings a confidence. There's just a certain level of confidence I see coming from Bussey that I don't really get the feeling from Anderson on. All too often, especially in this series, it's been on full display. There's been times where it's the puck is being played around. There's been a weird shot that gets saved in a weird way, but then it kicks to the corners. But then Vegas digs it out, and now they're passing it around. And you look at the goal, and Anderson's laying on the ground. Getting prepared to have to make a save from being laying on the ground, and he's got to get up. wife is constantly yelling, Freddie, get up, Freddie, get up, stand up. It's and you don't see that sort of desperation chaos, and at times it's necessary. It comes from Carter Hart too. He's another goalie that gets into that situation, I would say, relatively frequently, at least in the series that we've been watching. But you don't see that from from Bussy, excuse me. I just see complete confidence from him and the calmness. I think Bussy's also a little bit bigger than Anderson in terms of height. I just, man, I'll say it right now, I want to give the net to Bussy for Game 4. Ultimately, I'd like to give it to him until he proves to us that he needs to be taken out. But I think at least Game 4. I think you at least owe Brandon Bussy Game 4. Don't let this series get to, a must-win situation. You're one loss away from having to win every game of this series to win the series. Don't let it get to that point to give Bussy the opportunity to start a game in the postseason. I think if you look back to his regular season, I think he's more than earned it. He carried the torch for this team in the regular season, and yeah, he kind of puttered out there at the end, but it was his first NHL season. He was probably getting pretty tired. Those games were tightly packed there at the end, and Anderson found his game, and Anderson had a great chance, and he's had a great run. And it will go down in Canes history if they win this Stanley Cup as him being the large contributor to this. But with the situation that we currently see, being down 2-1 in the series, having to play another game in Vegas before coming home, I think play Bussy tomorrow night. It makes so much sense. If you want, keep a short leash on him. If he has if all of a sudden it's 2 or 3-0 or 3-1 at the end of the first, pull him in the first or start Anderson in the second. I think there's no harm, no foul there. But I think it's also good to kind of let him get a start in Vegas to relieve that pressure of being at home and having all the home fans, all the home crowd eyes on you. There's not going to be, I don't believe Vegas's fans kind of come after the goalie in any way with chanting or whatnot, kind of like Carolina does for Carter Hart. But don't tell ESPN. But I just, that's my take. I think let's see Brandon Bussy get a start here. He had a fantastic Game 3. He closed that game out in an unbelievable performance there. I think he's more than earned the opportunity here to get a start. Let's see what he can do for a full 60, and let's see what that does for the team if he starts the game. I think quite clearly it gave them some sort of jump, some sort of pep in that third period, some sort of sense of like, oh, we need to own this. We need to do this for him and give him an opportunity to look good as a goalie. So I want to see Bussy start Game 4, Rod. I hope you're listening. Let me just completely finish, recapping this game here. They go into double overtime last night. Nobody really had any sort of advantage in the first overtime there. The shots through the first period were 7-2 in favor of Carolina, 5-14 in favor of Vegas, then 13-9 in favor of Carolina. And then it was relatively even the rest of the game, 6-7 in favor of Vegas, 2-3 in favor of Vegas in the second overtime. Overall, the shots in favor of Vegas, 35-33. Like I mentioned, the faceoffs were well in Carolina's favor, and then the power play was pretty even, and then after that, it goes way into Vegas's favor. So, I didn't record after Game 2. I kind of wanted to. I just didn't get around to it. The last thing I want to mention between Games 2 and Game 3, the positives that come out of both of them, is that Carolina is not out. They're not down and out in any sort of certain situation. And this, in my opinion, this really stems back to what we talked about earlier in the season, which is Carolina has only been shut out. Only one team managed to shut them out in one game this season, and it was the St. Louis Blues in St. Louis. That is, to me, that is an indication that your team can score no matter the circumstances. Your team can score no matter how much time is left, no matter what the stakes are, especially in these last two games, game 2 and game 3. They're there to be clutch. They can be clutch. The comeback and the being down but never out, those are characteristics of championship teams. And even though they didn't get that win, which would have been huge last night, they made the comeback happen. They forced Vegas to play one and change. At 1.25 extra periods last night. That wears Vegas down. There's been some defensemen for Vegas. There's been some issues for the defensemen for Carolina. Chatfield and Miller come to mind. Carrier had to leave the game last night due to an injury, and I almost think Carrier left due to an injury just because it was between the second and third, and you're down 4-0. It's basically an impossible comeback to happen. Why risk this guy getting any more injured, especially considering he gets kind of bottom line minutes there. So I think that might have been a lot. Well, I'm speculating, but I think that might have been a little more cautionary than concern. But both teams are dealing with injuries. Both of these teams are inflicting physical tolls on each other, and it's being shown. And so as the series goes on, Carolina just needs to keep the pressure on. They need to keep that clutch factor up. Obviously, they need to play a full 60, and I'd really like a stress-free win